Thank you, everybody, for joining me. I am delighted to be speaking with Basir Mahmood, whose work I've been following for several years, actually. In order to engage with situations around him, Basir Mahmood ponders upon embedded social and historical terrains of the ordinary, as well as personal issues. Using video, film, and photographs, he weaves various threads of thoughts, findings, and insights into poetic sequences that coalesce into ever reinstituting forms of narratives. His career began with a year-long fellowship at the Akademie, you would have to pronounce this for me, Schloss Solitude in Stuttgart, Germany?
That's quite right, yes.
In 2011, and thereafter he went to participate in residencies in 5 different countries, and I'm looking forward to asking him about the impact of this travel and residencies have had on his work. His works have been widely known and widely shown, and most recently at the 10th Berlin Biennale for Contemporary Art in 2018 in Germany. Freedom of Movement in the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam in 2018 as well. And Innsbruck International Biennale in 2020. He has received numerous awards and accolades in the forms of prestigious residencies, grants, awards, including by the Sharjah Art Foundation, Videobrasil, and SAI, Harvard University, for his work. He was born in 1985 in Pakistan, and he spends his time between Amsterdam and Lahore. His work has been widely exhibited, previous to the ones that we've already spoken about, including recently Time of Others at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Tokyo in 2015, and the Abraj Group Prize Show in 2016 in Dubai. Basir studied at BNU, and he has recently been listed as a finalist for Portugal's prestigious and highly competitive Paula Cunha e Silvia Art Prize in 2020. He continues to be an academic, and he delivers talks and he teaches at notable institutions around the globe. And, I really admire that about artists who are still able to continue to teach students and continue to be a part of that academic dialogue. So now that we're done with your very prestigious and interesting bio, I thought we could begin. Can you tell me a little bit? Now, I know that you started off as a sculptor. So I'm quite interested in learning about your journey towards the forms of art that you are more widely known for, particularly video art and photography. So can you tell me a little bit about how you moved along towards this, and perhaps also how the impact of sculpture is still very much seen in your work?
I think video is something that through which I got more prominent later on after my university time, and also while traveling from residencies. But way before that, before the university, I was kind of self-taught sculptor. I was, interestingly, I was not interested into art, but my family, like my brother was a sculptor and my sister was a painter and my father was a poet. They all were very creative people around me, much more talented than me, and but they couldn't sort of continue making into art. And then I decided that I want to be an artist. It was, but I didn't exactly know where I was actually heading to, because I had sort of 2 examples in front of me who started off becoming an artist but ended up doing into advertising, into teaching, into other things. So, but still I wanted to sort of take up on it. And I think drawing was sort of the first connect that I had with art. And then I started sort of falling in love with it. I found something incredible about the feeling of me and my work, kind of a relationship with which I never had experienced before, like the idea of creating something, the creation. And then I was literally following my brother's footsteps. I started making sculptures, started doing drawings. Then through, I think I got to really a good skill. I could now look back into it and look at proudly. But so that's how I got to meet Salima Hashmi for my admission in BNU, and she offered me a scholarship for 4 years. And then I got to BNU. And then since then, sort of things started to change. I think I explored not just video, but many other mediums, materials. I started working with collages, I started making performances, started making films, and also reading a lot about films. And through that, I started to, camera itself is a very fascinating medium. It surprises me that still after like maybe 70, 80 years of it being used as medium of art, still there is something new about it, something fresh about it, which I started to sort of like and connect. But I think luckily I was also parallel to that, I was studying film, which started to sort of feed into my practice. Because, most of the time when you become a video artist, you started to sort of think that video is like the medium is doesn't really matter in that matter, because and I realized that the camera and the relationship that you have with the camera is a very different dynamics. And parallel to that, when I was studying or reading about film, that started to help me that how do I narrate story, how do I position myself, my characters, and then the being a sculptor, I think very recently I've started to call myself a video artist, and I started to become very comfortable with that. Before that, I was really trying to think that I'm a sculptor who's making a video work. But like last 2-3 years back, I realized, no, I'm a video artist. I'm very comfortable using that material. I'm thinking into that medium. I'm a video artist now, this is what my recent, the position is, that I'm a video artist who could make other things. So, and then thereon, and also it's not just your personal thing, but also the teachers you've been taught by, or the people who saw your work started to sort of see something new into your work. And their appreciation started to make sense that, okay, this is the medium that could have maybe a stronger or long-lasting relationship that I could have with this medium.
And you feel that for yourself, film is much more versatile, perhaps, and more expansive, right, than other mediums in a sense? A lot more
I found it very
maybe?
cheap. I think making film earlier on, now the point where I have got to, things have started to become more expensive. I'm on a point where I'm making, the production cost is much more than the selling cost of the work. So it's like the different dynamics. Before it was the other side.
Yeah.
When I started out making video, I had this one DV, I had this one camera from the university, and I was just reshooting on it. But slowly when I started to sort of, again, while traveling, trying to understand, trying to learn film, trying to reach out to filmmakers, trying to, just exploring how else I could sort of speak and how else I could shoot, and started involving since 2016 or 17 when I got a funding from Rijksakademie Foundation to work on the film, and suddenly you get this big money which you have to invest on the work. I started to realize there is a possibility that there are people who can do certain things better than me. And then first I started to work as a sort of position myself as a director into the set, then a producer. Then now the recent work I'm doing, I'm not really a director, not a producer. I'm sort of really going back to the idea of an artist who's using film or the settings of the film as a kind of a medium to navigate ideas and the people whom I'm collaborating with.
So can you tell me a little bit about the ideas perhaps that you are thinking about? What is it that is making you continue to create? What are the kind of things that you want to explore, the stories you want to tell? Are there stories or narratives that you're interested in investigating? Tell me a little bit about that.
When earlier we were talking on the phone and you were asking me that, is there anything you don't want to answer? I think this is one of the questions. Because I literally find it very difficult to say that this is what I'm interested in. Really, it is very difficult for me to say. Because, when I was a student and also was teaching, I started to realize that when you have to create, when you have to make a work, you get into this very serious zone and there's certain set of ideas that you want to touch upon. And me as a person who has been exploring like the 10 years, as I said, I was in BNU. BNU was not really an art school for me, but also a language school. I started to speak in English. I started to behave in a certain way. I started to present. And while traveling, going through different residencies, having a chance to live in Japan, to Brazil, to other countries, there's so many things I started to take up. So with time, my work sort of keep on changing. This set of ideas sort of keep on changing. But yes, there is a certain intellectual habits which you call that sort of keep on repeating. There's certain things that keep on taking my attention. Like one of it, like the idea of food, which started off with gathering. So there is every idea which is now at the moment is involved has some sort of an involvement which I could trace back. But at the same time, I would like to keep fresh all the time. This is something which I learned. I learned from a lot of people, but this is something which I learned from Salima Hashmi to stay. One day we were having a conversation, and she was a curator, and she helped me commission a film. And I thought it was a very cutting edge film, which I thought how would she understand it? It was internet and it was technology and the way I was shooting it formally. And I went to her again and asking, how did you manage to sort of understand what I'm doing? she said she empties herself all over again. Every time she has to, she has a conversation, she starts learning while the conversation is going on, and then express, then react to it. And this is something which I do also. I make a work, and there's a one period within the work which I'm having at the moment because I finished the work now, which I have to kind of really go away to the things that I have carried or the work that I have put up on me. And this is, I think, greatly inspired or learned, understood, or I taught by the filmmaking process. I think film is something that helped me to understand that ideas are something could be anywhere. It doesn't really always have to come from your personal life, or doesn't really have to. I can't be interested in everything. I can't be impacted by every single thing in my life. So as in filmmakers, when they make things, yes, they make things that inspire them, but at the same time, the film itself has to be true to itself, to its character, to the story, to the narrative. So I am the kind of a work that I'm trying to make. I hope they can stay on their own without the help of me or where I come from or the things that I think of. So this is how kind of things started to keep on changing. There is one thing that, as I said, that the food, the idea of gathering sort of keep on coming back, the idea of cinematic settings, like the film started to appear. That started to appear from I grew up in Lahore, into a neighborhood where, like, just a few streets away, we had this Lollywood. 2 studios were centered, and I saw a lot of films being made, Bari Studio and Avenue Studio. And I used to walk around with my father, who was really a film buff, who would sort of tell me who those people are, characters are. But while I was growing up, the film industry, the Lollywood, has this really downfall. So I was seeing them being made, but we were not allowed to see those films, because of the reputation they had. So I was constantly kind of really thinking of film as a kind of a labor, where these people are kind of really involved into making things, but I would not see the end product. So that started to somehow later came into my work and other experiences throughout the time. And truly, one thing that keeps me excited and fresh is that I'm honestly telling you, I do not know what I would be making next. Like, really, it's always this point, and it's always really feeling weak after making a work, after finishing a work. You started to feel really weak, and then you read upon various things. You start meeting people. I watch lots of YouTube, and lots of information goes into my mind, and because a lot of things inspire me or I get interested in, but my criteria is, if there is one thing that I get interested twice, then there is some that deserves a chance to sort of look closely into detail and then maybe form it into a work.
Wow. So you're constantly almost on, in a sense. And it could be anything that triggers an idea or an inspiration, in a sense, and it all sort of, in a strange way, comes into your work. How fascinating. And how lucky that you got to grow up watching Lollywood films being made. That must have been such an interesting experience.
Yeah, my father was, as I said, he was a poet. He couldn't really do. So he was commissioned to write a song for a film, and it was a song on Rangila and his characteristic. It was a very fun song. So he used to sing that song to us because the film was never made. And so, we always used to talk about the context in which that song would be played. So, through him, there were many interesting, through him and also my uncle, they would speak about film, and they would speak about how the first film they saw and what was going on into the cinema, and they would know each and every date and details and things like that. And thanks to them, I started to get kind of film myself through the knowledge. And also, Lollywood, when you go there, these big studios still exist, and there's also this glorified past of it that still exists, but which is not at the moment, because also, with this new emergence of cinema, nobody really owns them. Like, people are thinking that, Lollywood, like the new film industry, don't want to associate themselves with the name of Lollywood, but at the same time, the people who are associated with have this baggage or the past of this, where they wanted to work into the film or I remember when I was one afternoon walking, and my father wanted me to shake hand with somebody, and he pushed me, and this guy was sitting on the ground with other people and eating this naan and kulcha, and he told me that this is Sultan Rahi. So imagine, these sort of a thing came along somewhere in my head, and later helped me. But at that time, I was not thinking about that I would be eventually be making film or anything like this. But that's something beautiful about art, that you don't really have to go anywhere. They are the things that come within you, around you, or something that is already there that you can
Yeah,
take up
that's
on.
very true. And
Yeah.
also, I remember seeing in one of your works, you do have a piece that's quite reminiscent of Lollywood. And I believe that in that it was about a film that never got finished, right? So is that what you then took inspiration from your father's poetry?
Yes. So from there on, I went on, when I got funding from Sharjah Art Foundation, the funding allowed me to work on one night, one night sequence from one day, from morning till the night. And other than asking people to do this or that for the film, I went to them and asking them what they could do for the film. So it was the other way around.
So
And I wanted them to
collaboration.
perform, yeah, so I wanted them to re-perform the sequence or the scenes that they have
Wow.
performed for other films, but those films are never made. The things that are in their memory, or they were very, very fascinating things, which of course, and then I would position a camera and want them to perform the film. So you're taking out something which was belong to another context, but suddenly there are these sequences or images which are from the lost films, and suddenly they all started to make sense. So the work is called All Voices Are Mine, and the work actually changed a lot of things. I started to realize that how do I need to position myself on a film set? Where am I important, and why is it important that I need to only rely on my imagination? I was never happy to see my work as a product of one mind. I wanted to involve other people into it, and also their skills. Sometimes I was doing that thing earlier in different works, where I would go take up different people of different skills and want them I was thinking about how their idea of the work could become my idea of the work. If somebody's, let's say, is a porter, their job is to transport luggage from one place to the other, how their idea of the work could become set within the idea of my work, or an artwork, let's say.
And it, in a way, makes it much more authentic, because if their job actually is to be a porter, then they have a much deeper understanding and relationship with what being a porter is than I suppose a writer or filmmaker would have. That's really, really interesting. I find this particular project quite fascinating. And I know that, I mean, recent work of yours has also dealt with the idea of division. Work that you've been making recently, photographs that you've been taking while based in Amsterdam. Would you talk a little bit about this? How has the need for division come into your work?
Yeah, this is one thing that I always take up certain things, and I want to get into certain other things. I was always fascinated by the idea that artists could be fascinated by something. How do you get fascinated by something? And I think food was something that really started to emerge into my work in 2013, when I was having people to sort of have people to invite to sort of undefined event, and they would have collaborate through food or through gestures and things like that. And slowly later on, the food started to take up on like the more forefront, let's say, into the work. And this idea of division started to come in 2006. I started to think of it in 2016, when I started to share my life between Amsterdam and Lahore. And I started to, it's very different parts of the world. And I started to think about the idea that, this small curiosity of, having a small portion of food, like a packet of chips is of this side, and over in Pakistan is of this side, and things like that. How can I sort of think of a place where food can be divided equally all over? And it's really an imaginative idea. It's an idea that would obviously cannot exist in reality. So that was an idea to work on something or imagine a place where this food or resources can be equally divided into all over. Personally, from experiencing one place to the other, from one Amsterdam to Netherlands and from Netherlands to Pakistan, how do I see the wealth, the resources sort of unequally divided globally? So I started to kind of imagine, fascinated by these ideas, and started to work slowly on building things.
And tell me about the idea of food specifically. You've spoken about how it's interested you and how it started coming into your work, but what do you think it stems from? Does it stem from a missing the food in Lahore? Does it stem from the traveling that you have been doing across different cultures? And really, I mean, obviously one of the things that you really notice when you're traveling is the different food that people
Yeah.
consume and people create? Has it come from that? I just want to get to the crux of that a little bit.
Yeah, I think earlier on it came with the idea of gatherings. As I said, I would have people and they would have, like there's a work called Thank You for Coming, which is one of the kind of a work that changed a lot of things for my work. And that in that work was the first time I had food as some sort of a binding factor between the people who would collaborate or discuss or talk or speak through the means of food. And then I started to think about that how what are the in terms of really the calories that people I invite into the space, how many calories they sort of invest into the work and what food I can sort of get them, and and the water started to come into the work. So you really thinking also again in a physical sense as a sculptor, that there's something that exists in as an object, and there's an actor who is acting but eating food, which is a very physical and authentic thing to do. So this is how I started to sort of think about the idea of food later on, earlier on. Then slowly started to come really on as an aesthetics. I started to be fascinated by the colors, shapes, and there's a recent body of the work that I showed in a canvas gallery in Karachi, was very much about the aesthetics, the group, the how can food could be the core mean to sort of communicate and discuss. And of course, also thinking about being from Lahore and also been traveling, that how much food is sort of involved a daily part of our life, and how you're going to somebody's funeral is a different kind of a food than going into a birthday. So how the food is sort of playing a core role into a visual presence into any gathering or any people coming together. This is one of the sort of a fascination or the things that I've been interested in, the idea of gathering, how people come up closer together. And that's how I started to work with people from similar backgrounds, people from one community. Like I work with, minority like the Christian community in Pakistan. So this is how I started to pick up things. One interesting thing in the films that I do is which I think never really spoke about and never really I presented, is that there is not really one character. There's not hardly there were earlier in works in like Man-Made and My Father that we have posted today. There is like one character doing things.
Yeah.
But before earlier, later work, there is not even a single character. So I've been always interested in having groups, gathering, sort of coming together and resolving something or an idea of the work.
How interesting. So that sort of social dynamic and delving into that a little bit and the things that bind people and separate them in a sense.
Yeah.
Oh, very, very nice. Is there a particular work or a body of work that has really stayed with you? Something that perhaps has impacted your practice moving forward, or a work that was perhaps a turning point that made you kind of continue to pursue something? Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
I mean, I think for artists, the failures sort of stays much longer. I think the successful works sort of take up their own way. People start liking it. But, there's one thing that I have learned also within my practice. There's one work that I did in 2012 in Japan in a move to the better side. And the work dealt with the idea of illegal immigration and things like that. And at that time, it was not really an issue in Europe or elsewhere in the world. The immigration was the illegal immigration was there, but not really. After Syrian war, it became much more prominent, and the work took on its life, and people started to exhibit to show. This is what has happened in last year. There's a work I made called Moon Sighting in Bradford, in the context of Bradford and Meerpool. And this is the work when I made it, I thought it is really going out of my, comfort zone. There's a music, I appear into the film, there's a car, there's a guy from the internet, this social media star coming into the work. But
so lots of
I wanted
elements
to
at
do.
play.
Sorry?
Lots of elements at play then.
Lots of elements at the play, and also things that were not part of my practice ever before. Like I'd never got into the space of internet like that. And when I made the work, and Salima Hashmi was one of the curator, and I told her, this is what I'm about to do. And she said, go with whatever you want to do. So I made that work, and I felt that this work would take up its life. This is like, for me, as I said, is like one of the best work, but I think people don't like it. I don't know why. But I feel that this work is like belong to the future, kind of just to tell myself. Because this is the work I think changed a lot for me, like understanding and how it required a lot of lot of courage to make that work. We also, the half of the work was supposed to go on internet and half of the work was supposed to go on the museum. And we started to get like really reaction. People started to make videos in reaction to the work, like really
Really?
hatred
So you
or,
started a whole movement?
yeah. So I was like, so personally, suddenly I got into the reality. You know, as an artist, you're working into the space of museums or the galleries, or you're even if you are changing something, the space is very slow, and suddenly something became that real that the person I was collaborating with started to get like death threats or things like that. Became too serious, but of course, eventually it became all easy. People started to digest it. I mean, I was using hatred or some anger to fix something. I mean, if we can talk about the work, it's a different. We probably need another conversation for that. But anyways, I end up making the work, and this is something I don't know. Over the time, I have learned to become really courageful to make. Mistakes, to make things that I really want to do. And you know, in 2018, I had this really a shift into my practice where I told myself that I would only be making the work which are important to me or at least to somebody else. Otherwise, I would not be making anything.
It becomes much more meaningful then
yes,
when you're really
something, you know,
making work for yourself.
if there's a work and without making the work, I'm fine. If without making it, I would not make it. So if there's a work that is really important, I have to really do something about it, then that's what I'm going to do. And then you can see like 2018, 19 and 20, even now, the work has really completely shifted from one place to the other.
Interesting.
So moonsighting is one work. Yeah.
And it's because you decided that, okay, it's time to just do things that I really want to do.
Yeah,
I find it interesting,
With age, I started to feel like I'm getting really to the point where I need to make mistakes. I need to make things. I don't like the idea of being in a comfort zone with my work. I want to be in a comfort zone. I like the comfortable place to live in and everything. I don't like the idea of that artist being miserably living their life, but I don't want to be comfortable within the space of my work. That's something that I have take up through time, and I wanted to sort of keep on fresh. It's earlier on when I started to be an artist and the journey that I took, and so far reaching to this point, started also sort of gaining certain confidence. I don't know how much is going to be there. Maybe with time I started to become more fearful in the later, but recently I started to make work which are really ambitious, large scale. Like the recent work that I'm making required me a lot of work, a lot of attention, a lot of money, a lot of resources, things like that started to come about. And also, like, you need to have a supportive family. I have a family, my wife and my daughter and my whatever. So they are kind of also trust me to make such mistakes. So you're like, okay, you can do it.
No,
So
I think that's
sort of, these are the
important.
things that give you courage to make mistakes and go into the zones that you have not really thought were possible as an artist to go into.
I agree. And I think as an artist, it's important to keep pushing yourself. Like once you've mastered something, why not keep learning and moving forward and exploring new territory? Because otherwise, I suppose there's no point then of living life if you're not really living, if you're just coasting. The whole point is that you push yourself forward constantly.
So
Zahra,
I'm an artist who became artist by looking other artists, to be honest. From my home to residencies I've been always constantly looking at artists, even my art school, whether I was there. And I always look parallel to my age or younger or older. I always say this, I realized that with time after 10, 15 years of my practice, it is very natural that your own practice become kind of a boundary to perform in. And you started to become, you think, okay, this is your work and this is what you've been known for, this is what you've been appreciated for, this is your territory. And and I was thinking that I am making all the time, making a new work or something very experimental. And one day I heard another artist talking about the same thing, who I thought is making the same work from the last 10 years. So I thought maybe this could be a misunderstanding that I could also have about myself. I could be probably wrong in thinking that I'm making very experimental work. Maybe this is not true. So what is stopping me? What is stopping me after having a studio, I have a comfortable life, having reasonable money and the money I earn through my work or whatever. So why not to make the experiment? And you, as probably mentioned earlier, that I truly feel, and this is not what I'm saying to impress somebody, but my problem is to really my mind work much faster than I could work as an artist. I'm really lazy. People think I work a lot, but I'm a very lazy person. I work from 10, 11 to 5, 6. I only work during the daytime. I don't work
That's
in the
okay.
night. And I have a very settled routine to work as an artist, but this is the only thing I do. So when this is the only thing I do, then the thing actually deserves a chance to experiment. But still, if maybe a third person looking, and then sometime I also feel maybe it's not enough what I'm doing. There should be more. There's more things that I could experiment with.
Well, I think that's all part and parcel of it. As you continue to work, as you continue to experiment further and further, you maybe
Yeah.
reach that sort of point and you'll keep going forward. And I think that the way that you were talking about how your work is changing and how new elements are coming into it, new thought processes are becoming a part of it, then you are well on your journey, right?
So far, it has been that. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
it is quite surprising what we were talking about earlier. I am also get surprised at the things that I have able to make and the things, the exhibitions and shows. I thought I would have not thought of those things like 10 years back when I graduated, but with time, and I also constantly think about where am I heading, what would I be eventually doing. But I think one thing for sure, one thing which I've been teaching, or when I was teaching, I was telling students, there's one condition to making is to be excited. This is the only condition, that you have to remain excited, and the only way you can be excited about to go into a territory that are not known to you. If you are doing the same thing, you can tell to people that you are excited and all of that. And the other condition probably is not to lie to yourself. Always be honest to yourself. And I think this is what I learned when I was in a student. When I would exhibit, I would show, and there's a jury, and somebody would criticize the things, and they are criticizing the things which I know about the work, which I was kind of trying to hide away from, not really facing them. So I mean, if this is my work and I'm spending my life, my time, and everything into the work, the work should be known to me. It is known to me, but the only thing is that I have to be honest to it. And I have to be excited to it. And I remember the first drawing I made. I always tell also to my student or things like that the first drawing I made was nobody was looking, was not meant for any purpose or anything. But I was excited that I made something. The process of getting into the zone of creation. As I said, I was not born as an artist, not knowing the other people were around me were much more creative and all of that. But when I got into it, I realized the charm and the excitement, why these people are spending their life into the studio, because there's something about creating something. And imagine, like I always say, I mean, I feel really blessed that I do things this is for living. I create things for living. What is my problem? My issues are, the composition should be like this or that. If I should, the fruits here, or I should, move structure here. These are my problems, So this is fascinating to live that life.
You're absolutely right. I think sometimes we forget how lucky we are with the opportunities we create for ourselves, in a sense, and the enjoyable moments we tend to have. I think I
Yeah, also
sometimes do.
look,
I
like
take a moment and stop
not to
as
take
well.
yourself too seriously. Also,
Yeah, it's
when you
true.
start taking yourself too seriously, okay, you are an artist, and people started praising you. I was in Pakistan, and I've just graduated and doing shows. And when I got to Sharjah Biennale for the first time, I traveled outside, and people knew about my work there.
Wow.
Was like, wow, somebody could, from Australia knew what my practice is. So these
That's
are the things that
special.
started to build into your mind, that you are known and all of that. It's the it's not like the reality is very different. Like my father till his last days was asking me to do something proper. So my mother and my family still think Europe saved me from being a failure in my family. They think I am in Europe, I'm doing well, because otherwise they all the artists have certain ideas. So when you go into the bubble zone of being an artist, you started to think very weird things. Artists in two conditions. I realized that artists are very weird. One is when they have success, when and the other is when they are jobless. They start to think all that crap around them and start to build all that world. So
Well, tell me, you
yeah,
have received so many accolades, so much acclaim,
yeah.
so many exciting moments of recognition. What for you was maybe the highlight? You've spoken a little bit about Sharjah already, but was there
Yeah.
anything else that there was a
I
moment you were
think
like, oh, wow.
the first was getting into the university. I
Yeah.
had a very, very tough time to, like, when I got to the BNU, when I got to know that I would be getting a scholarship, was the biggest thing. I told myself, this is the best place I'm myself in the world. And whatever, if I become a failure, or as I said, from my family or from the people around me, the idea of failing as an artist is always there and still there. So that's what the time, and I felt like this is it. I achieved something, and I could really do, and I'm being, surrounded by all these creative people: Salima Hashmi, Rashid Rana, Ayaz Zokio, Resham Saeed, Mehboob Shah, Huma Mulji, and Mariam Sohail, and all these people were really. I don't know how do they feel about that time, but I am really. I felt that was the most exciting time for me. Experimented. I did theater performances. I made films. I really got into the place where I could really experiment. And then the second biggest was to go to Schloss Solitude in Germany. I think that was like the first time you're going to Europe, the first time you're traveling out, all the excitement and everything. And I went there as an artist, but I got to meet so many talented people, like who like not only artists but also filmmaker, poets, and I could not make really any work during this Lost Solitude, but that was a time really I learned a lot from the people who are there, and the time that I invest, to the point that after Solitude I never waited for the work. So I kept on making work. So that 1 year was very important for me.
And what about other residencies, perhaps? Tell me about your time in Japan. Is there something that really stood out at you?
Yeah, Japan was yeah, it's a different culture, of course.
Yeah.
It's very Europe. You can make sense, or South America, you can make sense. But Japan was kind of very different for me, very alien. And again, being there and have to make a work, and how people were treating you as being like an outsider. Nobody would sit to you in the tram, or you go to a
Really?
library and no, the library is full, but people are not coming close to you because they are shy or something like that. And I had this very strange story about, nobody believes it, but I got, the police came to arrest me in a helicopter. Yeah, this is
Oh
like a
my
Hollywood
God.
story that I had
Did you film
about
it?
Japan. In a helicopter, imagine. I was
No,
shooting.
but did you film the sort of journey of the police coming towards you to catch you and take you
No,
away? Oh no.
they asked me to hide into my hotel. They asked me not to come outside. So anyways, it was a stupid, I was shooting something, and they thought I was shooting like school children with their very, over there's a huge issue about like filming kids, and they take it very seriously. So somebody sort of complained that there's a brown guy sitting on top of the car and shooting school children who were
Oh
going from home.
dear.
So that's like I was really at that time I was like shit. I was looking at where's my passport, where's my money, and I have to. But now I can look back and I feel like wow, I lived that moment. So
Yeah,
that
that's
was
true
interesting
actually.
in that. And Japan, I knew Japan through a friend who is Yoko Hirakawa. I met during Solitude. In Solitude, as I said, I met a lot of people, a lot of conversation that helped me to grow. So there was one artist, one of the artists who really influenced a lot my thinking, my work, and also my relationship to the film. I think it was that time, and also there's another Canadian filmmaker. We would, after lunch or dinner, we would sometime really open like 35 camera on my bed and try to understand film. Or there's some poet I would go and speak to, or I met philosophers there. I thought they don't exist anymore. There's a philosopher whom I met, or a lawyer, or a chess player. So that was also a very exciting time. So through that guy, I got to know about Japan a bit more of a sense. And then when I got to know, he's also started to make sense of the conversation that we had, like where that person came from. So that helped me to sort of connect the dots, let's say.
It's true, these experiences make such a difference. And I wanted to ask you about, so you were part of the recent Lahore Biennale. Can you tell me a little bit about the work that you sort of created for it and the journey about that piece as well?
I showed a work, moon sighting, this
Oh,
work
you
which
showed
I
moon
said,
sighting, okay.
yes, and Monument of Arrival and Return. I
Okay,
was
yes.
very happy that I was managed to show it, the moon sighting there, and I knew that I need some curator who is not coming from a perspective of being Europe, you know, because to understand the work, what I meant. So Hural Kasmi luckily was really excited about the work and she wanted to show that. So I was very happy that I managed to show that work there. And also there's another work, Monument of Arrival and Return.
Yes.
So it was exciting to to be able to exhibit in Lahore. I didn't do after my time during when I did a show with Gasworks Grey Noise in 2011 was the last time I exhibited in Lahore. So it was
So
after
it was like a
really
homecoming.
yeah, it was really like a homecoming, and it is when you show into your city. There's a different order to the people. There's a different kind of an audience.
Definitely.
The audience that is coming from, the immediate audience or from your hometown is the most difficult one, and most honest one, and they can really understand or think about the work. So I was really excited about that part. Unfortunately I didn't had a chance to go and see, but I had conversation later to the people who saw the exhibition or to the work.
Were you surprised by any of the comments, or did any of them stay with you? What did they say?
I think it was, most of the comments comes like nice, we are all used to that. But there's also like the conversation about this work, about why did I place myself into the work, moon sighting, and because also the guy that's speaking is a Punjabi, and there's a certain texture to it, certain meaning to that. So we had conversation about the meanings of the work, which was really the case, because in that work I didn't want it to rely on the form, but I wanted to rely on the meaning of the work. That's why I wanted to have a song into the film which could make sense. I wanted to have a song that or song into the making, into the repetition, that the meaning of the work sort of goes into the head. So it was interesting that somebody from the city could really understand the meaning of Punjabi. Of course, when it goes into a subtitle, it has a very subtle meaning.
Yeah.
Punjabi has its own flavor to sort of
Exactly.
speak. Yeah.
So. Very sprightly. Now tell me, what's next for you? What are you working on right now? I don't know. You don't know. Is there anything that you really, really want to do that you perhaps haven't had an opportunity to do yet? And you may be working towards that?
There is one work, I wanted to go into the zone of animation, which was something that I never did or never tried. But I did try to sort of learn it. So certain time I'm not able to sort of get to that. So I want to sort of maybe equip myself to that point where I could really learn. So that would be probably coming maybe by the mid next year, because things takes time. And there's also another video work which I would be taking into production maybe in 2-3 months. I want things to settle down so that I could travel and I could work more freely. There's a series of photographs that I did with it's funded by Mondial funds that I'm working now at the moment. Was a very complex in order to achieve the work. So that is at the moment that I'm working on. I was in Rome last week for the premiere of the film, which I just finished.
Yes,
so that is the work that I recently just finished. So I'm really losing that sense of what, because you get into the work, there's so many things, and that was there's one work which was not very pleasant to make. So
and how so?
Why was it unpleasant? Yeah, so the idea of the work was very, very disturbing, and also how do I position myself was a difficult part. So this work was commissioned by In Between Art Film, is a foundation in Rome, and they wanted to commission 8 artists to work on the idea of domestic violence against women. That especially during the time of pandemic, when all over the world people were bound to stay home, then the rise of domestic violence happened all over the world. And they wanted 4 artists, and male and 4 female artists to work. And for me, in Pakistan, there's a very stark difference, which I thought I recently, by talking to filmmakers in Rome, I realized they did not face that problem, but I faced it as a Pakistani, because in Pakistan there's a very stark difference between men and women role. And also same goes with the art sort of ideas also. I never thought that I would be equipped enough to sort of deal with this sensitive idea, sensor-sensitive work. But that was sort of also challenging, sort of going to it, but also was difficult to how do I position myself into the work? How do I, as a male artist, how do I work on it? So I started to, when I was working, I really wanted somebody to really see. So there was a curator involved, Leonardo Bicazzi, who invited me to the project. We were sort of both looking into it, but also I was sort of taking some advices from my wife. I was also asking her how she feels about the work. But to research about the domestic violence, to research about what was going on at this moment was very disturbing. You know, getting to see the images, getting to see what people or women were going through. You know, and then of course I had to make my mind that I'm an artist, not necessarily of a gender. I don't really have to think according to that, because otherwise I would go too much into the burden of being a man, and I would not be able to sort of really touch upon to the thing. So then later on I positioned myself, I managed to make the work, but to edit the work, and I didn't want it to hide up on things. I didn't want it, this is the one work where I didn't want it to rely on metaphors. I was so angry about the content. I was so angry about the context. I wanted to find out if there are any artists who did this sort of a work. I didn't manage to see anybody who from my surroundings, from my friends or so. So I really was very difficult to how do I position myself into a context that is kind of mine, but from another sense, you know. So I finished that work. I premiered that work last in Maxi Museum in Rome. Was well received, but there were also seven other beautiful films to see, but not a very pleasant work, to be honest. Like
No, I'm
really,
sure it was
really
a very
disturbing.
heavy, but it's also important to make work like that sometimes,
Yes,
to really highlight
I
these issues.
yeah, it is. You know, I don't know. I'm an artist who sometimes get very emotional, even though I don't want to be. I'm like happy-go-lucky kind of a person. You know, I want to be in my zone of that. But there are things that, and you have to really, when you get angry about something, and I have started to work. I have my outcome to the world is only my work. If I see, you know, when I went to Boston and they were taking me to this room to investigate why I was here in Boston in America,
Oh,
I'm telling you, I was scared, but on the other side, I was happy that I was facing it because so many people go through that. So I was, as an artist, was happy that I was facing how terrible things could get. You know, you from Pakistan and there's an Americans who are investigating you with a dog and they're smelling your bag and things like that. I was happy on the other side to explore that zone. So again, with this work also, for me, it was difficult to get into the work, but I think it is more difficult to get out of the work. So I am now in that zone where I'm like, how do I get out of this work? I'm editing something, but my mind is sort of keep on going back to those disturbing things that I managed to see. Yeah.
wow. That sounds like a
Yeah.
very powerful artwork as well, and quite an interesting journey to have gone through it. My goodness.
Yeah.
I want to open it up for questions now because I feel as though it's time to let other people also have a chance to chat to you. So, does anybody have any questions for Basir? We've been speaking for quite a while, so it'll be good to hear from all of you.
Yeah.
Basir, while we're waiting, I wanted to also ask you about an exhibition perhaps that you really enjoyed putting together, either a solo show or a group exhibition that you really felt proud of having been a part of, or perhaps because of the way that the work came together or the message in the work itself, or being asked to be part of that particular location or museum.
So you know, when few years back I was making work by work, and I was thinking about I would make work and shift to another one, then to another one. I started to realize that I'm working for this one exhibition, which I would probably eventually at the end of my career would put into a one building, and I want to walk around and see what I have made and what life I have lived, and or the works or the travel that I did. So that privilege I had very earlier in Brussels, cinema galleries where they wanted me to put like all my work into that one building. So that was in 2018, and that was one privilege that I had to exhibit the works that would probably not matter to somebody else. As I said, the work which are closer to me are the work which are probably not well received, and that's how probably they become much more closer to me. And there's a work that I made in Two Eyes Not to Blink in Brazil when I was there. That was the work. When I finished the work, I thought this is the best work I have ever produced. But nobody was exhibiting the work for maybe 6 years or 8 years. Nobody liked the work in that sense. So when I was doing my own exhibition and inviting my own curator, I invited a curator, Lauren Whitmore from Brussels, to do the exhibition. I was having a privilege to put all my works together that were meaningful to me. So that was one of the exhibition when I felt very much kind of emotional into that, but also pumping myself, okay, I have to create another body of work equal to that point. So,